Welcome back once again to the Imaginary Gallery. It is TJ, your host. We are now on a new topic for this evening, still from Lundy Bancroft's wonderful book, Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. The next section is called The Abusive Man, or Woman, and Breaking Up, beginning with quotes.
Friends tell me that he's really not doing well since we split up. I'm worried about him.
Last time I tried to leave him, he scared me half to death. Sometimes it seems like he could kill me.
I don't want to take the children away from him. He's their father.
He was okay with our breakup until he learned that I was dating somebody else. Then Bancroft starts off with Van. Van spoke with a raspy, modulated voice that complemented his sadly expressive blue eyes. His reddish blonde hair was always wrapped up in a bandana, which, combined with his thick neck and upper arms, created the image of a biker. His language did not fit, though, this tough guy stereotype. He talked about pain and the need that he had to face up to oneself, of the process of denial and the process of acceptance. He seemed to be his own harshest critic, referring frequently to his own selfishness, his own immaturity, and other things that he called character flaws. He stated at the very beginning that he was an alcoholic and he was going to at least one AA meeting per day, and he had not had any liquor in the last 8 months. By his own description, he had actually nearly killed his partner, Gail, in a beating that he orchestrated 9 months prior. He would gaze at the floor and speak slowly as he recalled the assault. He was the picture of remorse.
It was bad,
He would say,
real bad. I'm lucky she's alive.
he had been arrested and spent that evening in jail, and then his mommy and his brother bailed him out the next day. And then he claims that he had drank nonstop for 3 weeks after all this, trying to blot it all out, what he had done. And then one day he woke up and he had bruises all over his body from some kind of fight that he doesn't have any recollection of happening or where it happened, and then he hasn't had a drink since.
I finally accepted the fact that I wasn't going to be able to run for myself forever. I was going to have to deal with what I had done to Gail.
He did not join any type of abusive program, though, until several months later, when the court required him to do so. For many weeks, this guy was Bancroft's star group member. He would challenge all the other men in the group about their denial, about their efforts to blame their own behavior on the partners, about their need to take an honest and painful look at themselves, and Bancroft pushed him a few times to stop using alcoholism as an excuse for abusiveness and examine more seriously the history of bullying of and violence towards Gail. He would react to the challenges with momentary irritation and then would soften up and say, I know, I still have a lot of work to do. In short, he seemed like an abusive man who was interested in doing the hard work involved in making real changes. Van and Gail had been separated since that severe beating. They were speaking from time to time, but they were not making love together anymore. Van said that he thought it would be a long time before Gail would be able to trust him again, and he would have to give her space. However, over a period of 3 to 4 months, this Van guy began to realize that Gail was not taking a break from their relationship in order to rebuild trust for this creature, as he had believed. She was unhooking herself from this creature. And as this dawned upon him that she was thinking seriously of shutting the door forever, he started a rapid backslide right before Lundy Bancroft's eyes. First, he surprised Bancroft one day by saying that Gail, quote, should really give our relationship another chance. Bancroft was stunned. Why on earth should a woman stay with a partner who gave her a beating that nearly killed her? I certainly wouldn't want to do that. Van had said,
The pain in our relationship wasn't all hers. You know, he hurt me a lot too.
Bancroft had asked if that somehow justified him mutilating or nearly killing her, and his answer was,
No, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying it isn't like that I was all bad and she was all good.
And so that means she owes you another chance, is what Bancroft asked. How many times do you get to beat a lady up before she stops owing you? To that, Van just muttered some nonsense under his breath and lightly shook his head. At the next session, Bancroft focused more time on Van, because separation is a time when abusive people can become particularly destructive. Since the previous session, Van had received the word from Gail definitively that the relationship was over and she was going to start dating others, which Bancroft said made this a particularly important time for the group to influence his thought process. He, of course, plunged quickly into a tirade about how hard he was working on himself in contrast to this Gail witch, who he claims was going nowhere. She's not dealing with her issues at all. And then Bancroft says he asked how Gail's progress was going to be assisted by getting back together with an abusive person. He said,
"Hey, I'm a lot better for her than those other losers she's hanging out with. Now, most of them are still drinking liquor, and they're acting totally immature."
Van's group was alarmed by his reversion, and some of the members raced to try to get him back onto track, pointing things out to him like that he was claiming to have made great changes, but his entitled insistence that Gail owed him loyalty was evidence that he was an abusive person who was not changing. He was slipping back into minimizing how destructive his abusiveness and violence was to an extreme, convincing himself that he was a more constructive presence in her life than other people were, and that he was failing to accept the fact that a lady does not have to be all good in order to have the right to live free of abuse. Bancroft kept an additional thought to himself, which was that based on his conversation with her, he was confident that Gail's life was not going nowhere, and that her primary goal at this point was to heal from what he had done to her. When he had made disparaging references to her issues, he was ignoring the reality that her issues were 90% him. Bancroft says he remained silent on this point because he was concerned, given the state of mind that Van was in, that the better he understood her healing process, the more effectively he would take steps to sabotage it. Now, Van was not as open to this group's feedback in the way he had been in previous months. His heels were dug in, and they could see the disgusted shaking of his head and the dismissive curl of his lip. The group had stumbled upon a core aspect of Van's sense of entitlement, which tends to happen with each client of Bancroft's sooner or later, and they weren't going to take it apart in a few short weeks. They hoped they could reach him eventually, for Van still had 6 months left to go of the 11 that a court had ordered him to spend on the program. Well, Van never gave them the chance. Unfortunately, less than 3 weeks later, being overwhelmed by his outraged entitlement, he approached Gail in a restaurant in front of many witnesses. He called her a fucking bitch and walked off, flashing her the finger. His verbal assault violated a restraining order, barring him from approaching her, and since he was already on probation for his grave attack on her to begin with, he was jailed for a minimum of 6 months. Gail had little desire to see Van behind the bars, but in this case his incarceration was a blessing, as it gave her uninterrupted opportunity to move on with her life, finally, which she did. Next, we will cover what an abusive person does if you are leaving it. Stay tuned.
I am the Narcopath, as you know.
Shortly after we began dating, I noticed you had a lot of hot male friends. Well, that's right up my alley, and that's another reason why I chose you out of the other 7 that I was auditioning, even though you heard nothing about them, and you never would. I saw it as a bonus deal, because I know that I can get whatever I want, from whomever I want. I saw a large population to deal with. You always used to be jealous and act like you thought I was flirting with your friends, which I told you that is ridiculous. I would never do that. I only have eyes for you. And of course, I ended up a few times with several of your friends, places without you, And I just told you it just happened. I ran into him, and we spent the rest of the afternoon at the movies, or whatever may have happened or may not. The point was you were jealous. And I noticed, slowly over time, as planned, because I figured I might as well get a bonus out of it, one by one, those good friends of yours disappeared. I think it was because of your insecurities. Because you knew I was the hottest thing in the world. You knew they couldn't resist my beauty. So you decided to choose me over them. Little did you know, I was telling them how abusive you were, how I wanted to leave, but I feared for my life. And they offered to help, but I said, no, please don't. So instead, they just left you alone, you left them alone, and you were all mine. You should take some tips from me. Otherwise, you'll have no success in your life.
And I've given you plenty of confessions. So, in return, I think it's time you let me tell you as well. I've got a bone to pick with you.
I've got a bone to pick with you. One of the things I couldn't stand when we were dating, I told you before how nosy you were, but I told you that I was working on a Christmas special at the church. I was asked to be Mary for the production. You know Mary and Jesus? I was the Virgin Mary. I disappeared for hours on end, and I told you we were working on the play, and it was just having some trouble, and the filming, and it was going to be a movie, and it was going to be my debut. I was going to be a star. Everyone in this world was going to know my name because of this production. I'm sure of it. But what did you do? One day you had to be nosy. You had to stick your nose where it didn't belong. And you followed me to the production hall and found out that someone told you. I told you they were lying, but I was trying to do a film called The Narcopath Does Seattle. We had so much footage. My thighs were open. My Virginia was squirting. And oh, it was going to be a hit. And you ruined it. That producer was afraid of you. I must tell you, I told him some stories. It got me in his bedroom, but I told him how violent you could be. He destroyed the master tapes, the master everything, and he said he was through with it. So, thanks a lot. Because of you, I'm not a movie star right now. I could be on the silver screen. I could be a household name by now. But because of you, I ain't. You're gonna pay for that.